If you're watching this video, there's a very good chance a man tried to explain Warhammer 40K to you, and at some point, very understandably, stopped listening because the facts are Warhammer fans are terrible at explaining Warhammer. They don't explain the thing, they explain everything that has ever happened in the history of ever to the thing. Hi, I'm Vadd, and we're not doing that. Here I'm going to give you exactly enough Warhammer 40K to understand what it is, why people love it, and what someone means when they start talking about Space Marines, Chaos, or some guy named Horus. You do not need to take notes, you do not need to memorize names, and you definitely don't need to watch the screen. I'm going to put something on in the background so YouTube's happy, but listen, this one is made to listen, not watch. Just here to encourage a little background listening. So, what is Warhammer 40K? Here it is. Ready? It is a gigantic science fiction universe where everything has gone horribly wrong and everyone is at war. That's it. That's quite literally it. It takes place roughly 40,000 years in the future. Humanity has spread across the galaxy. We have spaceships, we have advanced weapons, we have genetically engineered super soldiers, we have robots, we have aliens. It's a gigantic science fiction universe where everything has gone horribly wrong and everyone is at. The human empire is called the Imperium of Man. It controls this enormous part of the galaxy. It's a brutal, religious, paranoid, inefficient, and constantly falling apart. At the center of all that is the Emperor of Mankind. Thousands and thousands of years ago, he tried to unite humanity. He's incredibly powerful. He created armies. He created genetically engineered super soldiers he calls his sons. And these sons eventually helped create the most famous soldiers, the Space Marines. Space Marines are those giant armor guys you've probably seen. They're not normal human soldiers. They're heavily modified super soldiers. They're faster, tougher, stronger, harder to kill. They wear this enormous power armor. They carry guns that are basically massive grenade launchers. And all these Space Marines have their own little club. They call it chapters. Each chapter has a different color, tradition, personality, obsession. You don't need to know any of that. The important thing to know is the big armored super soldiers are the Space Marines. That's it. Big armored super soldiers equals Space Marines. Warhammer 40K is a gigantic science fiction universe where everything has gone horribly wrong and everyone's at war. You've got the Imperium of Man, the Emperor, and the Space Marines. So far, so good. Warhammer, humanity has these big armored super soldiers, the Space Marines, but most of the war is fought by regular humans. That's the Imperial Guard. I'm going to sum up the entire Imperial Guard like this. We have tanks, we have artillery, and we have more bullets and people than you have people. In Warhammer 40K, lives are cheap, entire planets are treated as expendable, and all this matters because the scale of everything in this universe is deliberately ridiculous. Wars are usually involving billions and billions of people. Spaceships are quite literally thousands and thousands of kilometers or hundreds of miles long. Battles can last for years. A whole planet will disappear, and it's a footnote in history. You know, everything here is deliberately excessive. You with me so far? You've got gigantic space fantasy, emperor, humans, super soldiers, army guys, and you've got chaos. Okay, there's a dimension called the warp. The warp is the dimension that humans use to travel across the galaxy. And the warp is kind of a psychic hell. It's filled with demons and powerful chaos gods. There's 4 big chaos gods. You don't need to know them. They all just represent things like violence, disease, ambition, obsession, pleasure, excess, just things that'll corrupt people. And everyone wants to talk about Horus. Remember, there was the Emperor. He had some sons. They made some super soldiers. Horus was one of the Emperor's sons. He was one of his favorite sons. And maybe you've heard this story before. Chaos corrupted him. Ooh, Horus convinced a bunch of his brothers, you know, the Space Marines, the sons of the Emperor here, to rebel. And suddenly, all of humanity's greatest warriors, those super soldiers, are fighting each other in this big civil war. It's just a civil war. It's got a fancy name, the Horus Heresy. You're going to hear that phrase a lot. You don't need to know every battle. Only important things here is that Horus was the Emperor's favorite son, Horus turned evil, and then half the family followed him, and then big civil war. At the end of the war, Horus and the Emperor fights. Obviously his dad wins, the Emperor kicks Horus's butt, but the Emperor is super badly injured, so they put him on life support, and they call it the Golden Throne, okay? The Emperor gets stuck on his golden throne for like 10,000 years. Humanity now thinks he's a god, and the entire Imperium of Man, all the people, okay, they think it's this massive religious empire that is worshiping this dead god, right? And you know, remember those Space Marines that were with Horus when they were rebelling in the Civil War? They're called Chaos Space Marines. So when you see the giant armored covered guys and spikes and skulls looking more evil than the giant blue Space Marine guys, is what you're looking at. You're looking at Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines. So, giant science fiction universe, big war, everything's going on. Everything's absurdly oversized. You've got the Emperor, you've got his sons, you've got the Space Marines, you got the little soldier boys, you have Chaos in the Warp, you've got the Horus, which is just a big civil war, and then there's aliens. You don't need to know all the aliens, just kind of like the big ones people like to talk about. I think Orks are popular right now. They're exactly what you think. They're big green idiots that love the fight. War is basically their favorite hobby. It's their religion, their sport, and their career. They're actually incredibly dangerous, which is kind of really funny, but we don't need to get into that. There's the Aeldari. It's space elves, okay? Space elves. Ancient, extremely advanced, elegant. They're also kind of responsible for one of the biggest catastrophes in galactic history because their civilization became so excessive they accidentally created a chaos god. You don't need to know any of that, okay? Aeldari, bunch of space elves, bunch of just stuck-up elves, right? You got the Necrons. These are ancient robot skeletons. They're like Egyptian dudes, okay? They went to sleep for a few million years. They woke back up. And there's the Tyranids, just a bunch of giant alien swarmy dudes. They like to show up at a planet, eat everything, and then go to the next planet. The last aliens we'll mention are the Tau. They're kind of like a younger alien civilization. They have all these fancy advanced technology, these giant battle suits and drones, and they have this big belief around the greater good. They're kind of like this futuristic looking faction, but they're also kind of like the worst. So, bunch of aliens, right? You got orcs, you've got some robot skeletons, you've got some space elves, you've got some like young guns, the futurists, the Tau, right? There's no good guys. Everyone here is either violent, cruel, authoritarian in the worst possible way, religious fanatics. Everyone here just kills everyone. Lives are so disposable. The whole galaxy is just filled with literal, actual demons, monsters, hostile aliens, and psychic corruption. A lot of the times in Warhammer, the most paranoid lunatic is paranoid because there actually is a demon in the back of their brain. This is basically Warhammer 40K. Everyone is awful. Everyone thinks they are justified. And somehow it always gets worse around the next corner. And that's where the term grimdark comes from. Warhammer, I think we can confidently say, is the godfather, the grandfather of grimdark. Warhammer's got that famous line, here it comes, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. That's the whole thing. You know everything. Warhammer 40K is not just one giant story you learn beginning to end. It's a setting. There are thousands of characters, planets, hundreds of wars, books, games, miniatures. You're not supposed to know all of it. I think most Warhammer fans don't know all of it. They just pick the part they like and obsess over it and then info dump on everyone. Listen, you know enough now. If someone says Space Marines, you know it's the big super soldiers. If they say Chaos, you know it's like demons and corruption. If they say Horus Heresy, you're like, oh right, the favorite son betrayed the dad, Civil War ruined everything. If they say Emperor, you're like, oh yeah, isn't he dead on his golden throne? Does everyone worship him as a god? Yeah. They say Orks, you're like, yeah, the big green idiots that like the fight? Yeah, I mean, when someone suddenly starts screening 18 different Primarchs to you, just leave. You've learned enough. That's Warhammer 40K. Everyone's terrible. Everything's enormous. Nothing works properly. Humanity's still alive out there fighting.